The story begins with our main character, Godu Tuma, quietly suffering under the life he is born into. Even though he is the eldest son of the Godu family, he cannot use magic properly, which makes him useless in the eyes of everyone around him. Since strength defines a swordsman in the land of the sun, people treat him like a failure from the moment he grows up unable to handle magical power. The servants pity him, but none of them try to help because they already accept that nothing can change his condition. Because of that weakness, his father constantly abuses him and reminds him that he is nothing but a disgrace to the Godu family. No matter how much Tuma cries or struggles, the violence never stops. The only person who ever gives him warmth is his mother. She gently comforts him, strokes his head, and keeps assuring him that he is strong in her eyes. Even while dying, she apologizes to him and mourns the cruel life he has to endure. Her words stay with him, yet deep inside, Tuma cannot believe them because he never once feels strong himself. Still, he refuses to give up. Year after year, he continues training alone. Since he cannot use magic, all he can do is endlessly swing his sword up and down, hoping effort alone might someday make him worthy. That small hope keeps him moving forward even after everyone else abandons him. His miserable position inside the family becomes obvious even during meals. Instead of proper food, he only receives nutritional pills because the family does not think someone like him deserves anything better. The taste disgusts him so much that it once makes him cry, but after enduring it for years, he no longer reacts. He swallows the pills in silence and immediately returns to training because practice is the only thing left in his life. While training, his younger brother, Goru Toji, arrives with several friends. Since Toji possesses talent and status, he treats Tuma like entertainment rather than family. He insults him, mocks him for using the training grounds, and forces him to address him respectfully. The moment Tuma hesitates, Toji violently shoves him away. Even after seeing him crash to the ground, Toji continues laughing and belittling him for being too weak to withstand a simple push. As Tuma struggles back to his feet, his thoughts drift toward the thing that ruined his life from the start. In the land of the sun, magical power naturally flows through every person's body, but his body is abnormal. Magic exists inside him, yet for some unknown reason it never circulates properly. Because of that flaw, he remains weaker than even a child. While Tuma quietly thinks about his cursed condition, Toji grows irritated by the lack of reaction and attacks him again, kicking him without mercy. Toji then begins humiliating him in front of his friends just for amusement. A simple finger snap is enough to make Tuma flinch in fear, which only causes more laughter from the group. They ridicule him openly and compare him to a clown because his weakness makes him look pathetic in their eyes. Even then, Tuma still lowers himself and apologizes for upsetting Toji, hoping submission might calm him down. Instead, Toji decides to mock him even further by bringing up swordsmen and the power that defines their entire nation. In the land of the sun, every swordsman possesses a special weapon known as a sword of fate. These weapons are symbols of strength and status, making them the greatest source of power in the country. Wanting to show the difference between them, Toji activates his magical power and summons his own blazing sword of fate right in front of Tuma. The display instantly reminds Tuma of the greatest humiliation of his life. During the ritual called the Election of Blessing, children of the land of the sun receive their sword of fate at certain ages. Since Tuma belongs to the prestigious Godu bloodline, everyone naturally expects him to awaken a powerful weapon. His father, Godu Tugin, is one of the 7 great heavenly saints who hold the purple rank, so nobody doubts Tuma's future at the time. But when the ritual takes place, nothing appears. That single moment destroys his life. The crowd laughs at him, his father becomes furious, and the entire family starts seeing him as worthless. Since then, Toji never misses a chance to remind him of that failure. He openly claims that someone like Tuma stains the honor of the Godu family, a clan that has protected the imperial family for generations. Tuma quietly endures the insults until Toji drags his dead mother into the mockery. He insults her as weak and worthless just like her son, which finally pushes Tuma beyond his limit. Unable to tolerate it anymore, he rushes toward Toji with his wooden practice sword in anger. The attack achieves nothing. Toji effortlessly blocks him, throws him aside, and calmly explains that their father never truly loved Tuma's mother beyond her appearance. Those words only deepen Tuma's rage, causing him to attack again, but Toji simply cuts the wooden sword apart with ease. After crushing him completely, Toji continues mocking the years Tuma spends training alone. He laughs at the idea of someone endlessly swinging a stick every day, despite having no talent whatsoever. His friends join in and ridicule Tuma's desperate efforts, treating his determination as something embarrassing instead of admirable. Toji then casually speaks about becoming the next head of the family and choosing a proper fiancé, making it clear that he already sees himself far above Tuma in every possible way. Standing over his broken brother, He coldly reminds him that all the effort in his entire life is worthless compared to even a single day of a talented person's strength. Meanwhile, Tuma remains on the ground silently crying. After enduring humiliation, violence, and rejection for so long, he realizes that all he ever truly wants is simple recognition from the people around him. He never desires power, fame, or status beyond that. As time passes, the day of the sacrifice to Kyokuma Island finally arrives. The scene shifts with Tugen finally deciding that exile is the best way to erase Tuma from the family without damaging their reputation. For a long time, he has wanted to kill his own son with his own hands, because he sees him as nothing more than an embarrassment. Still, directly murdering the eldest son of the Godu family would create scandal and attract attention, so he continues keeping Tuma alive until a cleaner solution appears. Once the opportunity for sacrifice arrives, Tugen immediately accepts it because it allows him to remove Tuma while protecting the family's honor at the same time. Filled with anger and disgust, he convinces himself that this method solves everything perfectly. After reaching that conclusion, he activates the flames in his hand and moves forward with the plan without hesitation. Meanwhile, Tuma continues living normally, completely unaware of what is happening behind his back. While eating the same nutritional pills as always, several swordsmen suddenly approach him. The moment he sees them, he becomes cautious because he already understands they are not there for anything good. Before he can fully react, the chief swordsman orders the others to seize him. The men immediately grab him and drag him away by force. Tuma struggles desperately because he has no idea why they are taking him, but the swordsmen show no concern for his confusion. Instead of explaining anything, one of them silences him with a slap across the face. Eventually, Tuma realizes they are bringing him before the Emperor of the Land of the Sun himself. Inside the hall, the people around him whisper among themselves, after recognizing him as the eldest son of the Godu family. Their reactions quickly make the situation clear. Everyone already knows he has been chosen as the sacrifice for the ritual. Because of that, Tuma immediately understands that speaking recklessly there would only make things worse, so he forces himself to stay quiet despite his fear. The Emperor calmly looks over Tuma and confirms whether he is truly the chosen sacrifice. The swordsmen respectfully affirm it. Tuma stands there in shock because he never expects to personally stand before the Emperor under such circumstances. Soon after, Tugen enters the hall. The moment Tuma sees his father, a small sense of hope rises inside him because he believes his father might stop this situation. That hope immediately collapses when the swordsman restraining him strikes him again and forces him silent. Tugen then introduces Tuma to the Emperor as his unfortunate son. When the Emperor questions whether Tugen truly accepts this outcome, Tugen kneels without hesitation and presents himself as a loyal servant of the throne. He explains that ordinary sinners are no longer enough for the sacrifice ritual, because disasters continue appearing more frequently. According to him, noble blood connected to the imperial lineage may strengthen the ritual, which is why he willingly offers his own son. Hearing those words leaves Tuma completely confused, because he still does not fully understand what this sacrifice truly means. Meanwhile, the Emperor reflects on Tugen's explanation and begins speaking about the ritual itself. Long ago, sacrifices were used to calm a vengeful spirit threatening the land of the sun. Criminals are usually offered as sacrifices, but the disasters continue growing worse over time. Because of that, the Emperor starts believing that blood connected to noble families may create a stronger effect. After reaching that conclusion, the Emperor approves the decision and announces that this time the successor of the Godu family will become the sacrifice. Once the order is given, everyone immediately begins preparing for the ritual while the swordsmen obey without question. Tuma can barely process what is happening. The realization that his own father willingly sacrifices him leaves him overwhelmed with fear and disbelief. Before he can resist, the swordsmen activate the sacrifice seal and burn the mark directly onto his body. The pain tears through him violently while the people nearby laugh and mock him. To them, the Godu family has handled the situation cleverly, because they managed to erase their useless son while preserving their public image at the same time. As Tuma writhes in pain, he watches his father calmly walk away without even looking back at him. He wants to call out to him, but before he can, the pain overwhelms him and he loses consciousness. Sometime later, Tuma slowly wakes beneath a harsh light shining directly into his eyes. Still dazed, he looks around and immediately notices a skull lying nearby with a hole through its forehead. The horrifying sight shocks him awake instantly. As panic sets in, he grabs his head and struggles to understand what happens to him and why his father abandons him. When he looks down, he sees the setting sun brand burned onto his chest, proving that the sacrifice ritual has already been completed. Confused and frightened, he raises his eyes and notices the place standing before him. It's Kyokuma Island. Tuma finally understands the true meaning of the sacrifice ritual. Every 10 years, the Land of the Sun sends a sacrifice to Kyokuma Island in order to calm the wrath of the demon that once terrorized the country. The island before him is the exact place where that demon is sealed. Realizing this makes everything painfully clear to him. His family never sends him away to survive. They completely abandon him there to die. That truth destroys the last bit of hope he still carries in his heart. No matter how cruelly his family treats him, he always believes they would never truly throw him away. Deep down, he keeps waiting for the day someone in that house finally acknowledges him. Even after all the abuse and humiliation, he continues hoping he might someday belong somewhere. Now that illusion completely falls apart. As the reality sinks in, Tuma breaks down emotionally. He starts wondering whether his wish to be accepted is somehow wrong. He cannot understand why simply wanting a place to belong turns him into someone unwanted. His thoughts spiral further as he imagines how different life might be if he were born with a normal body into a normal family. The more he thinks about it, the less sense the world makes to him. While he is drowning in those thoughts, monsters suddenly appear nearby and begin closing in on him. Their appearance alone makes it obvious they are deadly creatures. Faced with them in his broken mental state, Tuma stops resisting emotionally and starts laughing bitterly instead. Exhaustion consumes him completely. After losing his family, his home, and every reason to keep struggling, he decides it would be easier to simply die there and reunite with his mother. Because of that, he quietly lies down on the ground and closes his eyes, waiting for the monsters to kill him. But before the creatures can reach him, a violent magical whirlwind suddenly erupts around the area. The monsters immediately retreat in fear, which shocks Tuma enough to open his eyes again. The moment he realizes he is still alive, thoughts of his mother return to him. Throughout his entire life, she is the only person who protects him and blames herself for the body he is born with. Remembering her words changes something inside him because he finally understands that none of this is her fault. That realization becomes the reason he stands back up. Gripping his wooden stick tightly, Tuma decides that even if the entire world despises him, he still wants to live as his mother's son with pride. He wants to survive until the very end so that one day he can prove her love and faith in him are not meaningless. The desire to honor her gives him strength he never has before. With that determination, he takes a fighting stance and faces the monsters directly. The creatures immediately charge toward him, forcing him into a desperate battle. Tuma swings his stick wildly from side to side while trying to defend himself and strike back at the same time. He throws himself into the fight with pure desperation, but the difference in strength is overwhelming from the very beginning. The monsters quickly surround him and tear into his body with their massive teeth. Even while suffering through the attacks, Tuma refuses to surrender because he no longer wants to die there helplessly. His determination to survive keeps pushing him forward despite the hopeless situation. At that moment, a demigod named Tenrin suddenly appears. Seeing Tuma continue struggling despite his weakness leaves Tenrin genuinely impressed by his resilience. With a casual wave of his hand, he instantly wipes out the monsters and decapitates them effortlessly. The battle ends so quickly that Tuma cannot even fully process what happens before his body finally gives out from exhaustion and injuries. As Tuma loses consciousness, Tenrin looks down at him in confusion. Although he saves the boy on impulse, he now finds himself unsure about what to do with him next. Tenrin floats into the air while examining Kyokuma Island more carefully. The island immediately catches his attention because a massive barrier surrounds it. The barrier is ancient yet unbelievably powerful, and its structure only allows people with a specific bloodline to pass through it. Even though the principle behind it is simple, the execution is extremely advanced. After observing it, Tenrin realizes nothing dangerous is sealed inside at the moment, but the barrier itself still interests him enough to investigate further. At the same time, he understands that exploring the island properly will not be easy because powerful monsters roam everywhere. Fighting them constantly would interfere with his inspection of the barrier. He even feels slightly annoyed that he does not notice the strange nature of the island sooner. While Tenrin studies the surroundings, Tuma regains consciousness again. The moment the monsters notice him awake, they rush toward him without hesitation. Even after everything that already happens, Tuma still tries resisting them with his stick, but the difference in strength is too great. The creatures immediately overwhelm him and begin tearing into his body again. Watching from above, Tenrin becomes impressed by how stubbornly the boy continues clinging to life despite being so weak. With a single motion of his hand, he wipes out the monsters instantly and saves Tuma once more. Afterward, he picks him up and brings him elsewhere. Sometime later, Tuma slowly wakes inside a cave. Instead of the cold ground outside, he now lies on top of soft fur, while Tenrin calmly sits nearby smoking his pipe. As Tuma gathers his thoughts, Tenrin checks on his condition casually. While examining himself, Tuma suddenly notices something impossible. The wounds covering his body are gone, and even the sacrifice mark branded onto his chest has completely disappeared. The discovery leaves him confused, because he cannot understand how such injuries vanish so easily. Tenrin casually explains that he uses a healing technique on him. Although it has been a long time since he last uses that ability, it still works properly. Hearing that, Tuma immediately apologizes politely and expresses gratitude because without Tenrin's help, he would already be dead. Tenrin brushes the matter aside and explains that saving him is not part of any grand plan. He simply happens to come across him by chance. Tuma then remembers the monsters from earlier and asks about them in shock. When Tenrin casually mentions that he already eliminates them all himself, Tuma becomes speechless. The reason for his shock is simple. In the Land of the Sun, both demons and swordsmen are divided into 6 ranks: purple, blue, red, yellow, white, and black. The monsters attacking him, the Darrow, are usually white-rank creatures, but the group on the island appears much stronger, likely reaching red or even blue rank. Normally, only someone with purple rank strength can even reach Kyokuma Island alive. Since Tenrin arrives there alone and defeats those creatures effortlessly, Tuma immediately realizes he is facing someone far beyond ordinary humans. At the same time, something else feels strange to him. Despite Tenrin's overwhelming strength, his presence feels unbelievably faint. Even when Tuma tries sensing it, he can barely notice the existence of his soul at all. Only one type of being fits all those conditions. Because of that realization, Tuma concludes that Tenrin must be a demigod. Tenrin reacts with surprise because very few people recognize what he is so quickly, especially someone as young as Tuma. Tuma already knows about demigods through old stories. They are humans who surpass ordinary limits and step into the divine realm. Very few people in history ever manage to escape mortality that way. Realizing he has been saved by such a being leaves Tuma deeply humbled. He bows respectfully and admits he never expects someone like a demigod to help him personally. Tenrin, however, dislikes the overly formal attitude and casually dismisses the titles surrounding gods and demigods. To him, divine beings are simply unusual people with strange personalities. His relaxed attitude catches Tuma off guard because it feels completely different from the dignified image he imagines. Afterward, Tenrin grows curious about why Tuma is even on Kyokuma Island in the first place. Tuma initially hesitates because he does not think his life story is worth hearing, but once he starts explaining, everything pours out naturally. Without realizing it, he ends up revealing everything from beginning to end, including his family, the sacrifice ritual, and how he is abandoned there. Once Tuma finishes, he awkwardly apologizes for speaking so much. Tenrin does not mind at all. Instead, he finally understands the meaning behind the mark previously attached to Tuma's body. The mark is not merely a sacrifice seal. It is also a tracking and death technique designed to attract demons toward the target while monitoring whether the victim lives or dies. The purpose of the mark is to guarantee death without fail. Since Tenrin removes the seal through healing, the technique likely already reports Tuma as dead to everyone outside the island. Understanding the cruelty behind it disgusts Tenrin. After hearing the full story, he asks Tuma what he plans to do next. Tuma cannot answer properly because his entire life collapsed too recently. He still struggles to process the betrayal from his family and the reality of everything happening around him. Seeing his confusion, Tenrin casually offers to bring him back home if he wishes. But Tuma already understands there is no place left for him there anymore. Returning home would only create more suffering because his existence itself is unwanted. Since he cannot properly use magic, people reject him no matter where he goes. Hearing that, Tenrin gently pats his head and encourages him to stop thinking about others for once and focus on what he personally wants. After a moment of silence, Tuma finally answers honestly. More than anything else, he simply wants to stay alive so that his mother can be proud of him. That answer immediately pleases Tenrin because unlike power or revenge, Tuma's wish comes from a sincere place. Wanting to survive despite everything already happening to him shows a kind of strength Tenrin respects. Once Tuma introduces himself properly, Tenrin reaches a decision. Seeing potential in the boy, he offers to take him in as his apprentice. Tuma struggles to understand Tenrin's sudden offer. The idea of becoming the apprentice of a demigod feels impossible to him, so he stares at Tenrin in disbelief. In response, Tenrin calmly explains the reason behind his decision. His life is already nearing its end, and because of that, he starts thinking deeply about what he will leave behind after death. Tuma finds that hard to believe because demigods appear almost immortal in the eyes of ordinary people. Tenrin, however, confirms that even demigods eventually die because they are still human at their core. Reaching the divine realm does not free someone from death forever. Through enlightenment, Tenrin already understands the cycle of life from beginning to end, yet even after attaining such knowledge, something inside him continues feeling incomplete. That lingering emptiness eventually pushes him to travel across the world in search of meaning. During those journeys, he witnesses all kinds of people. Some live proudly while chasing power and desire without restraint. Others become consumed by greed and selfishness. Still, despite all the darkness he sees, he also discovers moments of genuine kindness and innocence scattered throughout the world. Those experiences stay with him. But even after seeing so much, one concern continues bothering him more than anything else. He keeps wondering what will remain after his death. Because of that, he eventually decides that the best answer is to pass down everything he learns throughout his life. He spends centuries perfecting martial arts and combat techniques, reaching a level few people can even imagine. At some point, he realizes that if a student inherits all that knowledge, then part of his existence will continue living on in the future through that person. While Tenrin explains all this, Tuma listens quietly, but ultimately believes the entire idea is pointless. Even if he receives knowledge from a demigod, none of it matters because his body cannot use magic properly. In his mind, someone like him remains hopeless no matter what training he receives. Tenrin immediately dismisses that concern and calmly explains that magic can actually be restored. Hearing that leaves Tuma stunned. For his entire life, everyone treats his condition as something impossible to fix, so the thought alone feels unreal to him. Tenrin confidently reassures him that it can be done, but the process will be unimaginably painful. According to him, the suffering involved will feel worse than enduring thousands of brutal training sessions in hell. After that, Tenrin begins explaining the true nature of Tuma's body. He introduces the concept of a celestial body, a rare condition that massively amplifies magical power and strengthens the flow of magic throughout the body. Specifically, Tuma possesses something known as the heavenly demon's body. Although the difference sounds subtle, Tenrin makes it clear that this condition is far beyond ordinary talent. When Tuma admits he spends his entire life training while surviving only on nutritional pills, Tenrin finally understands the root of the problem. Tuma's body itself is not weak. In reality, it contains far too much magical power. Magic normally originates in the heart before spreading through the organs and eventually reaching the muscles, giving people extraordinary strength. In Tuma's case, however, his body cannot properly handle the overwhelming amount of magic inside him. His magical pathways are far too narrow, preventing the energy from circulating normally. Because only a tiny portion of his true power moves through his body, he spends his whole life appearing weak and defective. Ironically, that flaw is also the reason he survives until now. If all his magic flowed properly from birth, his body would not withstand it, and he would have died as an infant. The explanation completely shocks Tuma because it changes everything he believes about himself. Until now, he always thinks he is weak because he lacks magic, but the truth is the exact opposite. Tenrin then reveals something even more painful. Most likely, Tuma's mother realizes the truth about his body long ago and constantly absorbs part of his overwhelming magical power in order to keep him alive. That strain slowly destroys her health, which eventually leads to her early death. Hearing that nearly breaks Tuma emotionally, because it means his mother sacrifices herself for him until the very end. Even so, Tenrin focuses on the solution instead of dwelling on the past. In order to restore Tuma properly, they first need to widen his magical pathways. After that, they must gradually increase the flow of magic throughout his body until it finally reaches a normal level again. But even that is only the beginning. Since Tuma's magic remains stagnant for so many years, his veins and pathways become too fragile to handle sudden power. To fully repair them, Tenrin explains that they will need to repeatedly destroy and rebuild those pathways over and over again. Every time the flow opens, Tuma will experience unbearable pain. By the end of the explanation, Tuma finally understands the reality of what lies ahead. Restoring his magic does not simply mean training harder. It means enduring suffering so intense that it feels almost identical to dying itself. Tuma is still unable to fully process everything he hears, yet he still chooses to accept Tenrin's offer. Even after understanding how painful the process will be, he does not step back. Tenrin notices his decision and asks again to confirm whether he is truly ready for it. Tuma's past experience of being treated as worthless because of his weakness pushes him forward. So he bows and expresses that he wants help and no longer wants to remain the same powerless person. Seeing that resolve, Tenrin accepts the decision and prepares to begin the process immediately. He extends his hand and uses his magical power to lift Tuma into the air. Before starting, he instructs Tuma to stay conscious and endure everything, because losing control will result in death. The warning makes the situation clear that survival depends entirely on his endurance. Once the process begins, Tuma's body reacts violently as Tenrin forces the magical flow inside him to expand. The sudden surge feels like his body is being torn apart from within. The pain intensifies rapidly until it becomes something beyond human tolerance. His body convulses uncontrollably, and blood begins flowing from his eyes, nose, ears, and mouth. The suffering becomes so extreme that he lets out screams that no longer sound human. Even Tenrin becomes surprised by what he is seeing because the amount of magic inside Tuma is far greater than expected. The body struggles to contain it, and even Tenrin's healing techniques cannot fully stabilize the situation. Realizing the danger, he urgently instructs Tuma to focus or his entire body will explode under the pressure. Despite the unbearable pain, Tuma refuses to give up. His mind repeatedly tells him that he cannot die here after everything he already endures. That determination keeps him conscious even as his body continues breaking under the strain. He endures the pain with sheer willpower, refusing to collapse no matter how much his body suffers. Tenrin observes him closely during the process and gradually becomes impressed. Even though Tuma's body is being destroyed by the overwhelming magical pressure, he continues enduring it without letting his consciousness fade. That level of endurance convinces Tenrin that the boy's willpower is far beyond normal human limits. After some time, the process finally ends, and Tuma's body collapses completely. He falls unconscious in Tenrin's arms, exhausted beyond recovery. Tenrin himself is also drained from controlling such unstable magic and struggles to catch his breath before confirming that the procedure is finally complete. Looking at Tuma's unconscious body, Tenrin reflects that even with his demigod-level control, managing such overwhelming magic is extremely difficult. The fact that Tuma survives the process itself proves how strong his will is, even when his body is pushed beyond its limits. He sighs and comments internally that Tuma turns out to be a very difficult student to handle. Even after that, he attempts to wake him, but Tuma remains unconscious and does not respond. Tenrin then reflects that he pushes too far during the first attempt. But he also understands that mastering this kind of power normally requires years of training, and in Tuma's case, the journey is only beginning. After 5 years of training under Tenrin, Tuma reaches the age of 15. Over this time, his body and skills transform through constant brutal training, and now he faces a three-eyed insane demon as part of his combat lesson. The battle begins with Tuma immediately switching into a fighting stance while channeling a heavenly technique that carries destructive force like collapsing mountains. Because of that overwhelming power, the fight ends quickly. Tuma forces the demon down, crushes its head into its body, and then tears it apart completely. The monster struggles, but its resistance has no effect, and it is destroyed in a short moment. After seeing the result, Tenrin praises his student because he already manages to defeat a three-eyed demon at his age. Tuma, now stronger than before, reacts with surprise at Tenrin's appearance. Tenrin acknowledges his growth, but also points out that he still lacks refinement in his movements. Tuma listens carefully and absorbs every detail because he values every piece of guidance from him. Tenrin reflects that in just 5 years, Tuma already masters the basics of celestial techniques. Even so, he still has a long path ahead before reaching Tenrin's level. While analyzing his own battle, Tuma thinks about small mistakes and realizes that if he adjusts his movement slightly, he can end fights faster and more efficiently. While Tuma continues thinking about improvement, Tenrin calmly informs him that his final test is approaching. That statement confuses Tuma because he believes there is still so much more he needs to learn. He expresses that thought, but Tenrin explains that although he does not teach everything, the basics are already complete. What remains now is refinement and perfection of what he already knows. Tenrin then shifts the conversation by stating that his own time is running out. This truth becomes visible when part of his body reveals an unusual transformation, showing that his existence is slowly deteriorating. He recalls that from their first meeting, he already mentions having limited time, and now that limit finally arrives. Tuma reacts with shock and anxiety while tears form in his eyes. Seeing this, Tenrin becomes slightly irritated and tells him not to show such a sad expression. He explains that a student should not send off his teacher with grief, but with calm acceptance. At the same time, he reminds Tuma not to focus on him anymore because the final task now becomes more important. The final test is to reach the center of Kyokuma Island. Tenrin explains that the deeper someone goes into the island, the stronger the demons become. At the very center, purple-ranked monsters exist, making it a deadly zone where only the strongest survive. Despite the danger, Tenrin expresses confidence that Tuma can clear it. Tuma responds with determination and confirms that he will complete the test. Tenrin continues by telling him that once he reaches the center, he will obtain the power he always seeks. He also suggests that he may discover what he has been searching for without fully knowing it himself. Tuma, confused, asks what exactly he is searching for. Tenrin responds that he does not know the full answer either, but the island likely contains the truth about it. He adds that even though escape is uncertain, it is still possible based on the time Tenrin spends there. However, before thinking about escape or anything else, Tuma must first complete the final test. After that, he can choose his own path freely, whether returning home or traveling elsewhere. Tenrin leaves the decision completely to him, explaining that he should follow what his heart desires because that is what he always seeks in the first place. Hearing this, Tuma accepts everything firmly and confirms that he will pass the test and follow his own path afterward. Both of them struggle to hide their emotions because the moment of separation approaches. Tenrin responds with calm acceptance and expresses that he feels glad to spend his remaining life with his student. After that, he says farewell and disappears into thin air, leaving Tuma alone. Tuma remains silent while staring at the sky for a long time. The memories of their years together replay in his mind, especially the fact that Tenrin dedicates his remaining life to teaching him. He realizes those years become the happiest moments of his life. Unable to hold back his emotions any longer, Tuma's strength collapses. His knees give way and he falls onto the sand. While crying, he quietly expresses gratitude toward his teacher, accepting the separation with deep emotion. 2 years pass after Tenrin's death, and Tuma continues carrying out the final test left behind by his teacher. That loss already becomes a permanent weight on him. But instead of stopping, he pushes deeper into Kyokuma Island because he understands that this mission is the last thing connecting him to Tenrin's path. As he advances further inside the island, the level of danger rises sharply. The first opponent he encounters in the deep region is a purple-ranked demon in the form of a great wolf. The fight turns intense from the start because the creature's speed and power exceed normal limits. Tuma struggles to keep control of the battle, but he refuses to retreat. The situation only ends when he releases the Mountain Fall spell, forcing the wolf down and finally destroying it. After that fight, the pressure on the island increases even more. Next, a group of furious apes appears, also belonging to the purple rank. Their size and aggression make them far more terrifying than ordinary monsters, and they attack in large numbers, forcing Tuma to adjust immediately. Instead of engaging them directly, he moves through their attacks at extreme speed, using precise movement to avoid being trapped. The situation shifts again when another purple-ranked demon joins the battlefield, a giant toad. The creature uses its tongue like a weapon, and it manages to catch Tuma's leg, pulling him toward its mouth with overwhelming force. Before the situation becomes worse, the furious apes also close in, turning the battle into a multi-sided trap. Because of the combined threat, Tuma reacts by gathering all enemies into a single area. He then activates his heavenly technique, creating a violent storm squall mixed with a piercing strike. The surrounding space fills with a powerful wind current that drags the monsters into one rotating force, disrupting their movements and keeping them locked together. Once they are trapped, Tuma follows through with a deadly strike. The attack lands directly across the grouped monsters, breaking through their defenses in one decisive motion. After a short but intense clash, all the demons collapse, and the battlefield finally goes silent. He barely manages to steady his breathing after the previous fight when the strongest purple-ranked demon finally appears before him in the form of a black skeleton. The presence alone carries overwhelming pressure, forcing him to immediately activate his magic power without hesitation. Instead of backing away, he stands his ground and recalls everything Tenrin teaches him. Those memories reinforce the idea that no enemy in the world remains unbeatable if the opponent finds the exact point where it can be destroyed, and then commits all strength into a single decisive strike. Because of that instruction, he focuses completely and activates the reverse heavens technique along with full magic concentration. He then calls down a heavenly strike with maximum force, creating a destructive wave that crashes directly onto the black skeleton. The attack breaks through its structure completely, tearing it apart bone by bone until nothing remains. After the battle ends, he exhales heavily and looks around the area, confirming that he finally reaches the center of the island. That realization matches what Tenrin once tells him, that he will find what he seeks in this place. At the same time, he senses an extremely heavy concentration of magic in the environment, far stronger than anything he encounters before. Even with that pressure, he does not stop. He steps forward and stands in front of the entrance that leads into the deepest part of the island. With full determination, he prepares to enter, focusing only on what comes next as he moves toward the unknown center. Tuma steps through the entrance and immediately gets caught inside a magical barrier that seals the passage. As he crosses the threshold, a voice echoes in his mind, confirming that something has been waiting for him. Before he can process it properly, his body starts shaking violently as if it is breaking apart from within. The pressure becomes so intense that he loses control and is thrown upward, flying through a long tunnel without being able to stop himself. While being dragged through the air, confusion takes over because he cannot understand what is happening or why his body reacts like this. The motion ends as he gets launched into a large space where he finally meets the source of the voice. The being reveals itself as the demon who rules this place and explains that since Tuma reaches this point after defeating all other demons on the island, only one condition remains. That condition is a final test in which Tuma must defeat him. If he succeeds, he will be granted any wish he desires. Tuma reacts in shock as he notices the demon floating near the ceiling of a massive magical dome. The strange sight confuses him further, especially when he realizes that the demon's form does not look normal. When he questions it, the demon explains that his physical body does not exist in this space, as only his spirit projection remains here. He further clarifies that Tuma is in the same condition now because the barrier at the entrance separates body and soul, leaving the physical body behind while only the spirit enters. This explanation shocks Tuma, and when he checks himself, he confirms that his body feels exactly as described. He struggles to accept the situation and reacts in disbelief while trying to understand how such a setup is even possible. The demon responds with arrogance and comments that he does not expect his descendants to be so confused. This mention of descendants surprises Tuma even more, and he questions it internally because he does not understand what connection is being implied. The demon then questions Tuma's reaction and refers to the divine dragon family, linking it to the imperial lineage and the ruler's blade. He expresses confusion that Tuma does not seem to possess it. Hearing this, Tuma realizes that the ruler's blade refers to the emperor's sword, something tied to the imperial bloodline. He starts thinking that this island might be created as a trial for imperial descendants. While the confusion continues, the demon grows impatient and decides to confirm everything himself. He summons a soul blade and suddenly attacks without hesitation. The speed and force of the attack catch Tuma completely off guard, and before he can defend himself, he is slammed into a wall by the impact. Even after the hit, Tuma feels a strange sensation as his thoughts scatter under the pressure of the attack. The demon approaches him and states that he is now convinced that Tuma truly belongs to the descendant line, which means the test will continue without delay. Before Tuma can respond, another attack follows immediately. This time, Tuma manages to react. He avoids the incoming strikes and begins reading the movement more carefully. However, every time he gets hit or comes close to being hit, his head starts to hurt, as if the technique itself affects his mind. He realizes that the demon's fighting style is not just physical, but also transfers pressure directly into perception, making it feel like the technique is being forced into his senses. The demon continues attacking from multiple directions, increasing the intensity, but Tuma gradually starts tracking the movements. Even though the attacks are fast, he begins avoiding them more cleanly. The demon notices this and comments with slight admiration that Tuma has good visual perception. Tuma then understands that he cannot rely only on raw reaction. He starts focusing his magic into his eyes to enhance his vision so he can predict movements instead of simply reacting to them. Even with this adjustment, he notices that the demon keeps becoming stronger and more refined with every exchange. The demon then remarks that he is ready to become more serious, which raises the pressure of the fight even further. Tuma realizes at this point that defeating him is not something he can achieve easily. However, the thought of losing here brings back the memory of Tenrin, and he refuses to let that happen. Because of that, Tuma strengthens his resolve, faces his opponent directly, and declares through action that he will not be underestimated. He prepares himself fully, deciding that he must give everything he has in order to survive this final confrontation. Tuma tries to take the initiative and launches an attack, but the demon reads his movements easily and evades everything without effort. While dodging, he remarks that Tuma seems to rely on prediction, and then immediately increases his speed to test that ability further. His movement becomes so fast that it creates pressure from all directions as he attacks from multiple angles without giving any stable opening. The sudden escalation shocks Tuma, but instead of panicking, he gathers his strength and activates the Stormbreak technique to counter the pressure. The clash surprises the demon, forcing him to jump back while observing the technique closely. After landing, he breaks into laughter and acknowledges that Tuma's abilities are better than expected, suggesting that the outside world has become more interesting than he assumes. Because of this, his attitude shifts from testing to seriousness. He takes a proper fighting stance, raises his sword, and declares through action that he will now show real strength. The change in pressure becomes immediate, and Tuma senses that the earlier exchanges are only controlled testing rather than full power combat. Realizing this, he understands that defending passively will not be enough and decides that he must strike first before the opponent fully activates his next move. He then rushes forward at full speed, preparing to use the heaven-crushing technique in an attempt to end the momentum early. However, the demon responds instantly by drawing his sword technique, lightning flash, and intercepting him mid-attack. The speed difference becomes overwhelming as the strike lands cleanly, cutting off Tuma's arm in a single motion. After the attack, the demon turns back with a calm smile and questions the result of that exchange as if evaluating him. Tuma collapses onto his knees, completely stunned by the outcome. His thoughts break under the realization that he loses the exchange and that he is now facing a level far beyond his expectations, leaving him in a state of shock as the fight continues to shift in the demon's favor. He immediately taps Tuma's forehead with a sharp finger strike and questions his state of mind, pointing out that he clearly loses focus too easily. He then comments that Tuma seems to underestimate how much training is required to reach real strength, while also making it clear that even with effort, Tuma will not be able to defeat him yet. Despite that, he explains that forcing Tuma to attack at full power is part of the process so that he can at least recognize his own progress. After hearing this, Tuma regains a bit of calm and reflects on the outcome. He concludes that the reason for his loss comes down to the gap in training and accepts that victory is not possible in his current state. As his attention shifts, he notices his arm and becomes surprised when he sees that the injuries are already starting to heal. This makes him realize that the earlier damage does not remain permanent inside this space. The man then shifts the topic and looks at his sword while questioning whether techniques like his can actually be passed down to future generations. He adds that if anyone who enters this place simply dies, then the barrier must exist to filter people, even though he has no intention of training those who lack potential. Both of them pause as they observe each other, and Tuma finally stands properly, bows and expresses apology while also thanking him for the instruction. The man responds calmly with a smile and asks for Tuma's name. After hearing it, he becomes curious and asks whether Tuma comes from a branch family. He also expresses surprise at how well Tuma handles close combat techniques and assumes that hand-to-hand training must be developing in the land of the sun. Tuma clarifies that his ability does not come from formal training in that system and instead attributes everything to his teacher. Hearing this, the man smiles and comments that the teacher must be a good person. He explains that he never has a student in his entire life because no one ever reaches a level worthy of learning his techniques. He further adds that the heir to the land of the sun must possess exceptional strength in order to qualify for the throne, which is why this entire test system is created to find someone capable of inheriting his skills. He then prepares to ask one final question related to the current state of the land of the sun. Tuma responds that the country is thriving, and this answer brings a sense of relief to the man, who comments that worrying is unnecessary. He expresses that he will be glad to have a student like Tuma in his lifetime. After reflecting on this, he acknowledges that he already considers Tuma to be someone he passes his techniques to, even if indirectly. The man then explains that Tuma only uses his techniques during the fight, and he himself does not actively function as a teacher in the usual sense. Tuma responds that he still learns many new methods from him and considers the experience equivalent to mentorship. Hearing this, the man smiles and accepts that interpretation, then shifts his attention to Tuma's sword experience and suggests that teaching swordsmanship can also be possible since Tuma already shows a strong foundation in it. After evaluating everything, he declares that Tuma successfully passes the test. As a reward, he presents his master's blade. Tuma reacts in shock and refuses, stating that he is not worthy of such a weapon. The man dismisses that concern with a smile and explains that worthiness is not the issue, since Tuma completes the requirement of the test. He further states that the blade will not remain in this place for long and should instead be used rather than left behind. Before Tuma can respond further, the man lightly strikes him again to stop his hesitation and reinforces that he already earns the right to wield it. He then allows Tuma to take it and immediately releases a powerful sword wave as a demonstration. While observing it, he remarks that although the sword is treated as an important relic, losing it is not something to regret. Tuma becomes shocked at this attitude and thinks about how the imperial heirloom passed down for generations is being treated casually as if it holds little value. The man notices Tuma's hesitation and questions why he freezes again, reminding him that he must stay prepared or he will die in real combat. He then declares that if Tuma no longer needs hesitation, then the next phase becomes actual battle. Despite Tuma's attempt to ask for a moment, the man does not pause and announces that mortal combat begins now. Both of them draw their swords and clash with a confident declaration that the real fight starts. At the same time, on a different part of the island, an unconscious girl washes up on the shore, marking the arrival of a new unknown development. Tuma continues fighting his teacher in the training space, and during this prolonged combat he reflects on the fact that 7 years have already passed since he was sacrificed and sent to Demon Island. At first, he assumes that his life effectively ended at that moment, but everything changed after he met Tenrin, who taught him heavenly techniques and gave him a path to survive. While the training continues, he reassures himself that his mother does not need to worry because he is still alive and progressing. At the same time, he starts questioning how time flows in this place because it feels completely different from the outside world. Inside, years of training have passed, but outside, it seems like almost no time has moved at all. This strange separation makes him realize that the barrier between his soul and body is what allows him to endure this extreme level of training. Even with that understanding, he doubts whether training in a spiritual state can truly improve his physical body. His teacher notices this doubt immediately and explains that even if Tuma thinks it will not affect his body, that belief is incorrect. He clarifies that the spiritual body still develops its own form, and right now Tuma's magical power is being trained directly. Because of that, his overall strength is increasing significantly, and once he returns to his physical body, the vessel itself will adapt and strengthen to handle that power. Tuma reacts with concern and raises the possibility that if his magical power becomes too strong, his body might not withstand it and he could die after returning. The teacher acknowledges that this outcome is possible and calmly states that the truth will only be revealed when Tuma returns. At that moment, Tuma notices something wrong as he becomes aware that the teacher's hand is beginning to dissolve. The realization brings panic, and he asks what is happening. The teacher responds calmly that he already explained before that he no longer belongs to the living world, and only the remaining fragments of his divine power continue to exist in this place. Because of that, his time is finally reaching its end. Even while fading, he gently pats Tuma's head and explains that there is no need for worry because he has already found a successor who can inherit his knowledge. With that responsibility secured, he can finally leave without regret. Tuma becomes overwhelmed by emotion and bows deeply, expressing gratitude for everything he has received, including the soul blade and all the instruction given to him. The teacher then corrects his mindset and tells him that he needs to believe in himself more because ever since he arrived, he has constantly underestimated his own abilities. He emphasizes that although he does not know why Tuma developed this habit, he has already overcome every trial placed before him. Because of that, continuing to belittle himself also becomes disrespectful to the teacher's efforts. He then forces Tuma to reflect on whether he intends to keep dishonoring his teacher through self-doubt. Hearing this, Tuma clenches his fist and rejects that idea internally. He realizes that constantly lowering himself also dishonors the guidance he receives. With a serious expression, he promises that he will remember this lesson permanently. The teacher reacts with satisfaction, stating that it is an excellent answer. He then calls Tuma by name and presents one final question, asking whether he considers him a good teacher. Tuma immediately confirms without hesitation that he is truly a good teacher. After hearing this response, the teacher smiles, waves gently, and slowly fades away as his presence disappears completely. Before vanishing, he expresses that he feels glad to have such a diligent student and confirms that he is proud of him. He bows after the teacher disappears, but the ground suddenly starts shaking, so he quickly jumps back. A huge stone drops from above, blocking the path he came from, and the sudden change makes him think the cave is collapsing. Before he can react properly, he feels his body getting pulled toward a stone marked with the word single blade, and he becomes confused about whether something is dragging him inside it. In the next moment, his surroundings shift and he finds himself in a completely different place where it is raining. Because of this sudden change, he starts checking his condition and wonders if he has returned to his physical body, but he realizes he is still in spirit form. While he is trying to understand the situation, a strange creature approaches from behind, and the heavy, dark pressure around it makes him feel fear immediately. He judges the aura and concludes that only the first demon could carry such power, which makes his body tremble. From this fear, he understands that he has no chance of winning and that any attack would lead to his death. The demon begins gathering energy for an attack, but before it can complete its move, a sudden and overwhelming wave of power cuts off its arm. From this, it becomes clear that someone stronger is present. The teacher appears nearby, and while observing the situation, he lets out a light chuckle and comments with a calm smile that the demon now looks angry and that it should be finished quickly. The protagonist turns back in shock, seeing the teacher standing there. The demon quickly forms multiple arms and releases several energy beams at once. Because of this sudden attack, the protagonist is forced to react immediately and uses his sword to deflect the incoming beams. After blocking them, he pushes forward, jumps in, and prepares to strike back with full force. His attack lands heavily and creates a massive explosion, shaking the entire area. From the side, Tuma watches the fight with shock, unable to fully understand what is happening. He struggles to keep track of the movement and starts questioning whether it is a shadow step technique. From the moment the teacher fully engages in battle, his movements become too fast to follow. Even so, he understands the nature of the fight clearly because of his knowledge of the land of the sun. In that land, only one figure is known to have the strength to stand against such a demon. From his perspective, that person is seen as a true hero. As he continues watching, the battle feels like the moment where a demon god is being overthrown by a single strike, linked to the legend of the first emperor of the land of the sun, known as the Heavenly Dragon. The teacher then swings his sword with confidence and expresses that the fight has reached its end. With a final decisive strike, he kills the demon completely. After this, the protagonist looks at the scene and understands that the stone likely contains memories of that historical event, and the meaning engraved on it seems to be a final message or gift. He recalls the legend that the first emperor once defeated a powerful demon and sealed it on Demon Island. To calm its anger, a sacrifice was offered every 10 years. However, over time the original purpose of the island changed, and what once served as a test for the first emperor became forgotten, eventually turning into a place used to discard unwanted people. Throughout all these years, only the spirit of the first emperor has remained on the island. As he reflects further, he notices his own body beginning to fade, and he realizes that his time in this place is coming to an end. He calls out loudly, trying to reach the first emperor, and declares that he is the successor to his power, but before he can even reveal his name, he is forcefully expelled from that space. He understands that at the center of Demon Island, what he has entered is not just a normal hidden dungeon, but something much deeper. And just as this thought forms, the space around him collapses. Because of that collapse, his soul is forced back into his body, and the connection between the spiritual space and reality breaks completely. As this happens, something changes at the core of the island, where it is described that from the deepest part of the abyss, the true emperor is said to be born. The moment Tuma returns to his body, intense pain spreads through him, and he screams because the sudden flow of power moving inside him becomes unbearable. The sensation reminds him of earlier training when he was 10 years old, when he had first learned about the nature of magic flow. At that time, Tenrin had explained that magical power circulates through the entire body and that to use it properly, it must be given a form. When asked about the difference from normal magic use, Tenrin had tested him by showing a specific hand movement and had asked him to copy it. He had failed to reproduce it properly, saying he could not even shape his palm in that way. But Tenrin had explained that repeated use of a movement eventually forces magic to take that shape, and that the form of magic depends on the technique being used. Once a form is created, it can be applied later or even forced onto others. Remembering this, he connects it to what he experienced earlier and accepts that it follows the same principle. From this, he concludes that his body is now adjusting to the new power entering it. Because he had learned healing techniques earlier, his body is still holding together, but he realizes that a new kind of form has likely been created inside his magic system. He also links this understanding to the memories he witnessed from the great demon, thinking that by seeing those memories, he may have unintentionally shaped his own magical form. During the vision of the battle, the Emperor's movements appeared clean and direct, almost like something from a training manual, while in actual combat training, the same figure felt completely different. From this contrast, he begins to understand that the first Emperor's technique, known as the Divine Blade, is not a myth and is said to have the power to kill even gods. Earlier, he had believed such stories were only legends, but now he understands that the power is real. Even after accepting this, he also realizes that he still lacks mastery and has a long way to go. Because of this, he picks up the nearby sword and reminds himself not to ignore the heavenly techniques he has learned, since he now has the guidance of two strong teachers. From this realization, he decides that he must not fail their expectations. As he continues to recover, he hears the sound of thunder above the island and looks toward the mountain, noticing how chaotic the environment feels. From this, he concludes that the island itself is far more unstable than he first thought. The constant tremors across the island make Tuma think the collapsing mountains are throwing everything into chaos. Because of that disturbance, even the demons seem restless and agitated. While moving through the area, a massive monster suddenly rolls toward him at incredible speed. He manages to block the attack with his sword, but the impact immediately shows how powerful the creature is. The purple-ranked demon Rentuda lets out a fierce roar and continues its assault. Tuma quickly creates distance and realizes that an ordinary weapon would have shattered from such force. Fortunately, the sword in his hand is no ordinary blade. Every sacred weapon possesses a unique ability, and the divine sword inherited from the first emperor carries the power of absolute durability. No matter how much force it endures, it never breaks. With that advantage, Tuma defeats the demon without much difficulty. Even after the battle, he feels that the sword's ability appears surprisingly simple for such a legendary weapon. Still, the reason soon becomes clear. The first emperor's divine twin sword style is so overwhelming that any normal sacred blade would break long before its user could fully unleash it. In comparison, unbreakability becomes the perfect ability. After the fight, Tuma sits on the ground and catches his breath. The battle reminds him that controlling such enormous magical power is still far from easy. The divine sword style remains dangerous to use in actual combat because of the strain it places on him. In truth, no additional ability seems necessary when the sword itself already survives techniques of that level. He has heard many stories about the King of Swords, whose power allows him to manifest sacred blades, but he has never heard much about the divine sword. Now he understands that its only known ability is its inability to break. Even so, he feels grateful. The weapon in his possession is something he could never have obtained through desire or effort alone. Remembering everything his teachers sacrificed for him, he decides that he can no longer live while depending on others. From this point forward, he carries their legacy and intends to honor it properly. With his current strength, crossing the sea no longer seems impossible. Yet whenever he thinks about leaving the island and returning to the outside world, hesitation grips him. His body is powerful enough, but his heart still struggles to take that final step. As those thoughts fill his mind, he suddenly hears footsteps coming from the forest. The presence immediately catches his attention because it feels different from a demon's aura. Moments later, a girl emerges from the trees and runs into view. The sight surprises him. After spending so many years surrounded by monsters, seeing another human feels almost unreal. The girl quickly raises her hand toward him and cautiously demands an explanation of who he is. Tuma can only stare at her in confusion. Although he understands that she is trying to communicate, he realizes that he cannot understand a single word she is saying. Earlier, near the shores of the Land of the Sun, Reese is carrying out a guild assignment. Her job is to escort and protect a merchant ship traveling toward the country. Everything remains normal until a demon suddenly appears and attacks. The demon is amused that even an A-rank adventurer is struggling against him. After observing the situation, he realizes Reese is fighting alone and has no allies nearby. Because she becomes his target, Reese tries to understand why he is focusing on her. The demon responds by unleashing dark energy and makes it clear that people like her are obstacles to his kind. The attack reaches her almost instantly, forcing her to raise a magical shield at the last moment. The barrier protects her, but she quickly notices another problem. His strange energy interferes with her magic, preventing her from using it properly. The demon continues pressing her and is entertained by her resistance. Meanwhile, Reese studies the situation and realizes she is trapped in a battle that heavily favors her opponent. When she sees the damage already done to the ship, especially the ruined stern, she understands that remaining there will only lead to defeat. As a result, she decides to take a desperate gamble instead of waiting for death. Without hesitation, she jumps into the sea. Her decision catches the demon off guard. From his perspective, her choice seems foolish, because the waters surrounding the Land of the Sun are famous for violent currents and countless sea monsters. Escaping through those waters is nearly impossible. Even so, Reese refuses to give up. As she is dragged through the sea and struggles to stay alive, she holds on to the determination to survive no matter the cost. Later, when the destruction on Demon Island causes major disturbances, the currents eventually carry her onto the island's shore. She coughs violently as she regains consciousness, and immediately thinks about the demon responsible for her situation. Although her magic begins functioning again, most of her energy has already been drained during her fight against the sea. The only fortunate thing is that her magical backpack survives the journey. Inside that backpack is a portable magic ship, but Reese knows it is useless for crossing the dangerous seas around the Land of the Sun. At that moment, she has no idea where she is or how she can leave. Because of that, she can only hope that someone else is somewhere nearby. That hope quickly begins to disappear when several demons run past her. The island appears to be filled with monsters and nothing else. In her exhausted condition, fighting them is impossible. While trying to stay hidden, she notices a ranked demonic triangle bear staring directly at her. The creature attacks immediately, forcing her to dodge. She responds with a lightning rope spell, hoping to restrain it, but the monster casually destroys the magic with its paws. Fear grips her when the beast prepares another attack. However, instead of continuing toward her, the creature suddenly shifts its attention elsewhere and begins moving away. Confused by the sudden change, Reese looks in the same direction and discovers the reason. Standing nearby is a purple-rank Demonox Ogre, a far more terrifying presence that immediately draws everyone's attention. Just as the monster lunges forward to attack, a powerful wave suddenly cuts through the area and strikes it before it can reach Reese. The attack comes from Tuma and saves her at the last moment. Seeing that level of strength immediately reminds her of a story she has heard before. The island is known for its violent seas and countless monsters that have built their own ecosystem over many years. It is a place of exile where anyone sent there is believed to never return alive. In the Land of the Sun, people know it as the Island of Extreme Demons. The realization fills Reese with fear. She has already survived too much to die in a place like this. Because of that, she quickly retreats toward the shore. While running, she notices the person who saved her and is shocked to find an actual human living on the island. Not knowing whether he is friend or foe, she immediately uses magic to restrain him. Tuma only scratches his face and smiles awkwardly. His reaction makes it obvious that he cannot understand anything she is saying. Reese becomes frustrated and assumes he is pretending. Before the situation can continue, the bear charges toward them. The monster rushes in and swings its massive paw without hesitation. Reese freezes and shuts her eyes, expecting the attack to hit. Instead, a loud impact echoes through the area. When she opens her eyes again, the sight leaves her stunned. Tuma has already killed the giant monster with a single strike. The ease with which he defeats such a creature completely catches her off guard. His strength rivals the legendary warrior she has heard about, yet something feels strange. Despite being an A-rank adventurer, she cannot sense his presence at all. Meanwhile, Tuma simply smiles and tries to reassure her that the danger is gone. Only afterward does he remember that they cannot understand each other's language. While he wonders how to solve that problem, Reese takes a tongue ring from her bag. The item allows people to understand any language once it is worn. She gestures for him to put it on. Tuma follows her instructions, and the moment he wears the ring, the language barrier disappears. Reese immediately seeks an explanation about who he is and where they are. Tuma is surprised by how effective the item is. After apologizing for the confusion, he introduces himself and explains that they are currently on the island of extreme demons. Hearing this, Reese begins thinking carefully about his identity. His name sounds familiar, and she suspects he may belong to a noble family from the land of the sun. Tuma clarifies that the family is connected to the imperial household, but that connection has nothing to do with him. He prefers to be addressed simply by his name. That answer helps Reese relax. At least he does not appear hostile. Feeling more comfortable, she expresses her gratitude for his help and mentions that there is no need for formal manners between them. Tuma agrees and decides to speak more casually. After that, he turns his attention to her identity. Reese apologizes for not introducing herself earlier and finally explains who she is. She reveals that her name is Reese, and that she is an A-rank adventurer from the Kingdom of Aelst. After learning that Reese is an A-rank adventurer from the Kingdom of Aelst, Tuma becomes curious and tries to understand what that title means. His confusion immediately catches her attention. Reese is stunned that someone can be unfamiliar with such common knowledge even while wearing a word ring. As the conversation continues, she gradually realizes how isolated he has been from the outside world. When Tuma mentions that he has been living on the island for around 7 years, Reese finally understands the reason behind his ignorance. The answer leaves her speechless. Spending 7 years on an island known as a place of death is hard enough to believe, so she decides it is only natural that he knows nothing about recent events. Because of his long absence, she explains that the Kingdom of Aelst and the Land of the Sun have only started trading with each other during the past few years. As a result, many people from the mainland are now entering the Land of the Sun. Hearing that, Tuma becomes interested in the changes that have happened outside. Before the conversation can continue, however, he notices Reese suddenly losing strength. Her legs give out beneath her, and she begins falling. He quickly catches her before she hits the ground. After checking her condition, he realizes she is not injured. Her problem is exhaustion and depleted magical power after everything she has endured. Tuma carefully lays her down and decides she needs something to recover her strength. At the same time, the bear he previously defeated begins moving again. Without much concern, he signals the monster to come closer. Reese stares at the creature in disbelief and becomes curious about what kind of monster it actually is. Tuma admits that he does not know its official name. Since the island is full of rare yokai, he simply calls it a triangle bear because of its appearance. To him, the name seems perfectly reasonable. After killing the creature completely, he removes its gallbladder and prepares it as food. Having spent years surviving on the island, he considers it highly nutritious and beneficial for recovery. When he offers it to Reese, she is horrified. The sight alone makes it impossible for her to imagine consuming it. Tuma honestly admits that the taste is unpleasant, but he remains confident in its effectiveness. His reassurance does nothing to help. Reese immediately backs away and refuses. The idea of drinking it feels completely impossible to her. Seeing her reaction, Tuma becomes embarrassed and quickly drops the matter. He explains that he has no intention of forcing her. Reese also feels slightly guilty for rejecting the offer so strongly and expresses gratitude for the effort. Even though she cannot accept it, she appreciates that he was genuinely trying to help. Afterward, Tuma drinks it himself without hesitation. As he does, he reflects on how unusual the situation is. Reese is the first human visitor he has met in years, and offering monster gallbladder during their first meeting suddenly feels like a terrible choice. Meanwhile, Reese watches in complete disbelief as he consumes it comfortably, making the entire situation seem even stranger. Once the matter is over, Tuma shifts the conversation toward her future plans. Reese explains that she naturally wants to return home if she ever gets the chance. The problem is the island itself. The surrounding sea is famous for violent storms and powerful monsters capable of destroying even large ships. Escaping from the island is considered nearly impossible. Tuma listens carefully, and focuses on the practical details. He learns that Reese possesses a portable magic boat and already knows the direction of her homeland. For a brief moment, that makes the situation sound manageable. However, Reese immediately dismisses the idea. A small boat would never survive among the countless monsters roaming the sea. Without special movement magic, the journey remains suicidal. After hearing everything, Tuma calmly reaches a conclusion. Since the only obstacle is the journey itself, he simply offers to escort her home. The suggestion is delivered so naturally that Reese is left completely stunned. Throughout their short time together, everything about him has already felt unreasonable. But this proposal surpasses all expectations. Once again, she finds herself unable to understand how someone can speak about impossible things as though they are completely ordinary. Tuma observes the small magic vessel with doubt as its size and simple structure give no impression of a safe journey. Reese explains that the craft runs entirely on magical energy and moves by gliding over water instead of cutting through it, which already makes it feel unstable to her. Her concern grows as she considers how fragile these emergency ships are when exposed to strong winds and waves, especially in an area like Gokumijima, where the sea is constantly violent. She also explains that the waters are filled with dangerous monsters beneath the surface, making any crossing even more uncertain. Tuma responds with calm reassurance, stating that there is no need for worry as long as focus is maintained, but Reese continues to feel uneasy as she looks toward the unstable horizon. Once they set off, the sea immediately turns hostile, and the small boat is shaken violently by the rough waves. Reese reacts in frustration at the risky decision, while Tuma struggles to keep the vessel steady as the water keeps pushing them off course. The situation worsens when a massive whirlpool suddenly forms ahead, pulling everything toward its dark center. Reese panics at the sight of the swirling destruction, realizing the boat is about to be swallowed. Tuma remains steady and assures her not to panic, promising that nothing will harm her as long as he is there. He then prepares to leave the boat, causing her shock as he moves without hesitation. He launches himself upward from the vessel, rising into the sky and breaking through the storm with sheer force. He strikes the air with a powerful sky-shattering kick, releasing a shockwave that pushes back the collapsing sea currents. Suspended above the raging water, he remains focused and motionless for a brief moment as he gathers his strength for a deeper technique. His mind recalls his past helplessness against overwhelming power, which pushes him to refine his attack further. He activates the Supreme Heaven Fist, directing his energy toward breaking the flow of the whirlpool and forcing an end to the chaos. As he analyzes the technique further, he adjusts its application, shifting from a single concentrated strike to an expanded palm technique that spreads force across every point of the disturbance at once. This causes the surrounding air to fracture, releasing a wide explosive wave of energy that spreads outward in a controlled burst. The whirlpool collapses instantly under the pressure, and the violent sea settles into calm silence as the destructive force disappears into drifting mist. Tuma remains suspended briefly in the cleared sky, framed by fading light and dispersing spray, while Reese watches in complete shock from the boat, unable to process how a single person has suppressed the ocean's fury. After the danger passes and the distant land becomes visible, he descends back into the boat with steady control and calm breathing. He glances toward the fading outline of the island behind them and acknowledges the hardships he has endured there. Turning back to Reese, he expresses a determined intent to finally proceed toward her homeland as their journey continues. Tuma keeps his gaze on the shrinking island behind him as the distance grows and the sea opens into a wide, uncertain path ahead. With that sight fading, he mentally closes his time on the island and frames it as a completed trial, then shifts his focus toward the outside world he has long prepared to face. He holds onto the resolve formed through his training, treating his departure as a continuation of his promise to his teacher, carrying both memory and purpose forward without hesitation. Far away, inside a silent cathedral filled with cold pressure, a hooded man remains kneeling before a floating eye-like orb that pulses with unnatural light. He delivers a report claiming that the daughter of Elementia has been lost after escaping into dangerous waters, presenting it as confirmed failure of pursuit. The orb reacts immediately with a stronger glow, and a harsh voice questions the reliability of his claim, creating pressure that shakes his composure. His confidence breaks as he struggles under repeated scrutiny, and his apologies fail to soften the situation, which continues to escalate in severity. The orb expresses frustration over his inability to understand the importance of the target's survival, reinforcing that her existence remains a critical threat to their plans. He is ordered to maintain strict surveillance over the port of Lestral to prevent any chance of her return, and when he seeks clarification on duration, he receives no response, leaving him in uncertainty. The orb continues analyzing the situation and concludes that if she survived, the only possible landing point would be the land of the sun, prompting the deployment of another agent to that region. The pressure increases further as the warning is repeated that her survival would destabilize their entire operation, and failure will not be tolerated under any circumstance. The command is finalized with absolute certainty that if she is found again, elimination must be guaranteed without hesitation, removing any room for error. In open waters, the journey continues until a massive marine snake of A-rank level suddenly erupts from beneath the sea, breaking the calm surface. The sudden emergence triggers panic as the creature looms over the small vessel, forcing immediate danger onto the group. The protagonist reacts instantly by drawing his sword and positioning himself between the monster and his companion, taking responsibility for the threat alone. He engages the creature directly and ends the encounter in a brief, decisive exchange that restores control over the situation. After the fight, calm returns to the deck as he stands steady, unaffected by the brief chaos. Reese observes the result in shock and processes that an A-rank sea monster has been eliminated with a single strike, while the protagonist shows no awareness of its classification, treating it only as another threat removed. She dismisses the matter to avoid confusion and shifts her attention back to their route, redirecting focus toward their ongoing journey. Several days pass across open sea with no major disruption, and the travel settles into a steady rhythm of movement and survival. Both remain on alert while handling basic routines, with supplies managed carefully as the sea stretches endlessly around them. Reese stays observant of water patterns and advises adjustments whenever currents begin to shift, ensuring the vessel maintains stability. At one point, another deep-sea creature rises, but before it can fully surface, a sudden burst of force neutralizes it instantly, sending it back into the depths without resistance. Despite these occasional threats, the voyage remains mostly stable, and Reese continues monitoring the horizon as they approach their destination under favorable wind conditions. By the fourth day, the outline of the Kingdom of Arust becomes visible in the distance, confirming their arrival point. Exhaustion from the journey becomes evident in Reese as she expresses discomfort and a strong need for rest and proper care after days at sea. When the protagonist casually offers to create water for her, she reacts sharply out of embarrassment and frustration, causing him to withdraw his suggestion immediately. She then clarifies that her reaction is not anger, but fatigue combined with his lack of social awareness, which leaves him slightly confused but silent. As the port of Lestral approaches, her tone becomes more serious, and she advises caution once they enter unfamiliar land, emphasizing the risks ahead. She then questions his plan after arrival, which causes a sudden realization in him that he has no concrete information about his target's identity or location. This realization creates panic as he recognizes that his preparation is incomplete. In the same moment, another practical problem surfaces in his mind, confirming that he also has no money for what comes next. Tuma reacts first to the arrival at the port by expressing frustration over the lack of currency, mistakenly referring to it in a way that confuses Reese. She responds by offering to cover their expenses in town, explaining that she still has enough funds to support both of them. His surprise grows because he does not expect such help, but she clarifies that without her assistance he would not have even left the island safely, making her support practical rather than emotional. This leads him to express sincere gratitude, recognizing that her presence has become essential to his situation. As the conversation continues, Reese shifts focus to survival in the outside world and suggests that he register as an adventurer. She explains that joining a guild allows access to work through commissions, including monster hunting and miscellaneous city tasks, which provides a stable way to earn income. She further explains that in this system, identity, background, and status do not matter, since only individual skill determines success. This idea appeals to Tuma because it offers both independence and a way to sustain himself in a structured environment. He reflects that although he once dreamed of the outside world, he never specifically planned for this path, but the opportunity now seems necessary. Reese observes his reaction and comments that he appears naturally suited for an adventurer's life, while also pointing out that their current situation leaves very few alternatives. This leads Tuma to question her knowledge of the country of the sun and her reason for helping him. She downplays the concern by treating it as a simple interest, but his curiosity remains as he notices her involvement feels intentional rather than random. As they continue traveling in the small boat, Reese informs him that entering the country will not be simple because strict immigration rules and movement restrictions are currently enforced. This information forces Tuma to reconsider his plans as he begins to understand the complexity of the world beyond the island. When she asks about his next step, he pauses and evaluates the risks before making a firm decision about his identity. He requests to be addressed only as Tuma and explains that he wants to abandon his family name so he can be seen as an individual rather than a representative of his lineage. This decision comes from his realization that holding onto his name keeps him tied to expectations and dangers from his past. His thoughts deepen as he reflects on his heritage and the people connected to it, recognizing that continuing under that identity could expose him to political and personal risk in a foreign land where movement is controlled. He also considers the consequences his survival could bring if it becomes known in his homeland, which strengthens his resolve to completely detach from his former identity. This leads him to mentally finalize the decision to discard the name Goyindu as a necessary step for his future survival and independence. Reese notices the change in his expression and senses the weight of his thoughts, prompting her to comment that he appears to be carrying a heavy burden. She responds with quiet understanding, acknowledging his internal struggle without pressing him further. She then offers reassurance by affirming his new identity, addressing him simply as Tuma, which eases the tension he carries. This acceptance causes his composure to soften, and he reacts with visible relief, silently acknowledging the shift that has taken place within him. Their exchange is interrupted when Reese points toward the horizon, drawing his attention to the approaching destination. The port of Lestral in the Kingdom of Alust comes into view, with its busy docks and white structures marking the beginning of their arrival on the mainland.
Here I am.